Imagine being accused of a crime in the Middle Ages. Not proven, not explained, just accused. You are not asked what happened. You are not asked to defend yourself. Instead, your body is brought into the room, because in the Middle Ages, truth was not something you discovered. Truth was something you forced out. Pain was not a mistake in the system. Pain was the system. If you confessed, you were guilty. If you didn't, you were hiding the truth. Either way, the result was the same. This video is not about monsters or madness, it is about methods, carefully chosen, legally approved, widely accepted. Because medieval torture was not random cruelty, it was organized, it was deliberate, and it was terrifyingly normal. Now let's look at how it actually worked. These were the methods they used. The rack was one of the most classic torture methods of the Middle Ages, but that did not make it simple. On the contrary, it was one of the most systematic. The victim was laid on their back. Their wrists and ankles were tied with ropes. These ropes were then looped around rollers at both ends of the frame. Then the mechanism was turned slowly. The purpose of this torture was not to break bones immediately. The goal was to keep the body at its absolute limit. At first, there was only a feeling of tension. Then the joints began to strain, the shoulders, the knees, the hips. After a while, cracking sounds would come from the joints. These sounds were seen as a sign that a confession was close, because the pain had become unbearable. The rack was considered a clean form of torture. There was no blood, no cuts, yet the body was being torn apart. Joints were dislocated, nerves were damaged, muscles were ripped. And the most frightening part was this: the victim could survive, but they would never walk the same way again, never work the same way again, never live in the same body again. For this reason, the rack was used not only to extract confessions, but also to serve as a warning. The message was clear: your body belongs to the state. If you resist, we will take you apart, piece by piece. Strappado was one of the most brutal, yet one of the most simple torture methods of the Middle Ages, because this method required no complex device, just a rope and gravity. The victim's hands were tied behind their back. The wrists were bound together with a single rope, which was then thrown over a beam or a hook in the ceiling. Then the body was lifted upward. The moment the feet left the ground, the torture began. The executioner of this method was not a person, it was gravity. The victim's entire body weight pulled down on the shoulders. Within minutes, the shoulder joints would dislocate. Nerves were stretched, arms went numb, hands lost all sensation. But the torture did not end there. Sometimes the victim was suddenly dropped. Just before hitting the ground, the rope would be pulled tight again. This sudden stop could completely tear the shoulders apart. Sometimes weights were tied to the feet. With every added weight, the pain multiplied. The purpose of strappado was not to draw blood. The goal was not to break the body, but to break the will. Because this torture was silent. Screaming changed nothing. Resistance was impossible. And in many cases, the victim survived. But their arms were never the same again. Some could never raise their arms for the rest of their lives. Some were left permanently disabled. That is why strappado was used not only to extract confessions, but also to leave a lasting reminder. The message was clear: you survived, but you will pay the price every day. Water torture was one of the Middle Ages' most insidious methods, because from the outside it looked almost harmless. There was no blood, no broken bones, no cuts, just water. The victim was laid on their back. Their mouth was forced open. Sometimes a funnel was placed down the throat. Then the water began to pour, slowly, continuously, without stopping. After a while, the body's reflexes took over. Swallowing became impossible. Breathing grew difficult, and then panic set in. The goal of this torture was not to break the body, but the mind. The victim truly believed they were drowning. The sensation of death felt far more real than it actually was, because drowning produces more fear than pain. The lungs feel as if they are filling, the chest tightens, the brain sounds the alarm, but most of the time, death did not come. They stopped just at the edge. If no confession followed, a little more water was poured. Water torture was especially favored because it left no marks. When the victim was brought before a court, there were no obvious injuries on the body, but the mind had already been shattered. That was why this method was ideal for authorities. There was a confession and no visible wounds, and everyone believed a harmless method had been used. That was the most terrifying part. Crushing and pressing methods were among the slowest forms of medieval torture. This method did not rush, it did not shout, it did not accelerate, it simply waited. The victim was usually laid on the ground, sometimes on their back, sometimes face down. Heavy stones, metal plates, or weights were placed on the chest or the back. At first, the pain felt almost bearable, but that was an illusion. As the weight increased, the rib cage could no longer move. Breathing became difficult. Each breath grew shorter than the last. The goal of this method was not to break bones. The goal was to control breath. If no confession came, more weight was added. One more, then another. Minutes stretched into hours. This torture was often silent. There were no screams, only a strained breath. Some victims lost consciousness. Some died slowly. But even death was rarely quick. Crushing torture was often used to teach one thing: resistance is not heroism. Silence does not bring salvation. The system is patient, and it always has more weight. In the Middle Ages, torture was not always carried out behind closed doors. Some forms of torture required an audience, because the goal was not only to extract the confession, but to create an example. Victims were brought into city squares. They were fastened into pillories, locked into wooden frames, left completely immobilized. In these methods, pain was not always physical, but psychologically it was devastating. For hours, sometimes for days, they were exposed to the gaze of the crowd. Everyone was allowed. Shouting was allowed. Spitting was allowed. Insults were allowed. Children threw stones. Adults mocked. The power of this torture was the crowd, because a person can endure pain alone. But when humiliated in front of a society, they break. Women were among the most frequent targets of these methods, accused of immorality, witchcraft, or disobedience. The purpose was not only punishment, it was to send a message. If you become like this, we will erase you in front of everyone. Public torture did not preserve order, it preserved fear. And fear was the most effective tool of power in the Middle Ages.